Hello, everyone. Welcome to All Things College and Career, the podcast to turn to for all of your college and career planning needs. We are your hosts, Meg Gary
and Bobby Ryan,
owners of academic and career advising services located in Kennebunk, Maine.
We started this podcast to provide helpful information to listeners researching careers, colleges, or academic majors. Choosing your career or college is such a big decision, which is why our motto is learn before you leap. Before investing a lot of time or money, it's so important to do your research and to really explore your options.
Each podcast will offer interesting stories and valuable insights that we think you will find entertaining and informative.
Subscribe to our podcast and you'll have it ready to go on your playlist every Monday morning. So, learn before you leap each week with us.
Today's guest is Susan Austin, probably the most energetic person we have met. She has so much going on, it's crazy. The thing is, though, she's doing it all so amazingly well.
Yeah, she really is. So let's see. Sue is the Assistant Superintendent of MSAD 60, a large school district made up of 3 towns, the Director of the Ryan Home Project, providing housing for displaced teens in her district, and the owner of Cloverleaf Stables, where they provide horse boarding, lessons, summer camps, and shows.
Wow, that's a handful.
Yeah, it's a ton.
Susan gets into her career path that led her to her current position as Assistant Superintendent. Her passion for helping the youth in her community and her desire for the Ryan Home to become a model for other towns to implement.
She also talks about running Cloverleaf Stables and her family business, Shane's of Maine Ice Cream, a favorite in Maine and beyond. There is a lot to cover here, so let's get started with our conversation with Sue.
Hello, Susan Austin. Welcome to All Things College and Career. Thanks so much for doing the podcast today.
And thanks for having me.
Hey, Sue. So you're here at the Ryan House, or are we calling it the Ryan Home?
It's the Ryan Home, yeah.
Okay, we're here at the Ryan Home, which is our childhood home, but it's now, well, Sue will get into that later, but I wanted to just say we're at the Ryan Home, and we're all here together.
And I must say, it's looking beautiful.
It is.
Yeah, we've had a lot of support.
Beautiful.
It's been wonderful.
It's gorgeous.
And we're really excited to talk to you today,
Thanks.
Sue. Okay, so we wanted to ask you straight away, can you tell us 3 things you love about your job as Assistant Superintendent at Noble High School?
So 3 things I love about my job. I love that I see kids every day. I was a high school teacher for 10 years, and high school kids just make me smile all the time. Even between when I'm grimacing about some of the things that they do.
I was just going to say, it's pretty impressive because sometimes high school kids can...
Teenagers are not always easy. But
it can be a challenging age.
They can, but I enjoy them immensely. So students are first and foremost. The role as the assistant superintendent is very diverse. Part of it is basically anything else as assigned by the superintendent. So I wear a multiple set of hats, and I actually enjoy that a great deal. So every single day is different, and even when things get really hard, there's always something good coming down the pike. So that's a great thing. And I feel like I have a good opportunity to make a difference in the world of MSAD 60, which isn't just Noble High School, but it's the whole K through 12 of North Burke, and Lebanon schools.
That's a good point. I said Noble High School, but of course, as a superintendent, it's
the
all
whole
schools.
shebang, which is fun.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, I guess. Can I have 4 things?
Sure.
I love that I can be at the high school on a regular basis for where my office is, but that I get to go to every single school in the district and see little tiny kindergartners and 4th and 5th graders, and just in the middle school and all that, and be able to interact with the staff that are dealing with all of those different age groups. And every school has its own flavor, so that's really fun too.
Yeah, that's really special. You mentioned that there's tons of different things you do in a day, so we'll get into that later because our listeners are going to want to know about that.
Yeah, but so where did it all begin for you? Obviously, you didn't just become an assistant superintendent.
No.
So what direction did you decide to go in out of high school?
When I got out of high school, I went to the University of New Hampshire for an undeclared moment because I had no idea. I was a fairly strong English person, so I ended up as an English major. Loved the program at UNH. Great professors. It was just really interesting and fun. Also had an art minor. So I spent a lot of time in the art area, which was also wonderful. And I really went in 2 directions when I got out of school, either getting into the art piece of it or editing is where I wanted to be. However, as an English major, walking out of UNH, It's not tons of opportunity right away.
Right.
And my family had a family business. So I ended up back at home for a while helping out in the restaurant business and picking corn in the vegetable stand and doing all the things that I used to do. And then I had an opportunity to be an ed tech or a paraprofessional, they called them in New Hampshire at Odyssey House, which is I don't believe it's there anymore, but at the time it was a residential treatment center for kids with alcohol and drug issues. So that was really
that's so interesting.
Yeah, it was. And it was the opportunity. I went in, and just was in classrooms supporting families and kids, not families, but kids. And what I found was the students that were at Odyssey House were identified kids typically through a special ed program. And they were the students that were able to get into a program and get help, where that's not always the case in school settings. So that was a great experience. And I did that for a couple years and did a long-term sub, like in a classroom I took over for a maternity leave for a science teacher, that kind of thing.
Right. So you were basically there full time.
Yeah, I was there full time.
I have to back you up. So when you got that opportunity at Odyssey House, did you get hired there, do you think, because you had an English degree, like you were helping students that way? Or how do you think you got that job?
Premise. Honestly, I got the job because my boyfriend at the time's mom worked there and opened the door for me basically to get in. She ran the kitchen there and just said, hey, they're looking for some help at Odyssey House. And because I'm assuming my resume was positive enough that because I had my college degree and that I, so I could get the qualifications in order to be a paraprofessional. That was fairly simple and easy.
Is that something they expected you to do right away, get those qualifications?
Yeah. And I honestly don't remember well from New Hampshire what I needed to do, but from the state of Maine, it's a fairly simple process. You get your ed tech certification based on your level of education. So an ed tech 1 typically didn't have anything beyond high school. An ed tech 2 usually had a couple of years of college, and an ed tech 3 is usually somebody that's either pretty close to a degree of some sort. So can I advertise for ed tech positions in any of the school systems? It's a great way to get your feet wet and get in the door and decide whether or not you like kids or not. That's a big part of it. You have to like kids, and the work that is involved with it.
What a success story for you to go from an ed tech to an assistant super. So that shows there is,
a path.
There's a clear, So with Odyssey House, I did that for about 2.5 years. And then I saw a position at Noble High School open up as a resource room teacher. And this was in late August, early September. So it was a late hire. And I applied on a whim. I didn't know. I grew up in Sanford, knew of Noble, but really hadn't. I think I'd been to Noble once in my entire life. And I said, well, what the heck? I'll just go for it. And because it was a late hire, I say now, I don't think I would ever have gotten hired in today's standards. It's a much different world today than it was.
Right. It's a lot tougher.
Yeah, it is. So they hired me uncertified.
Oh my goodness.
Not only uncertified in special education, but uncertified as an English teacher. So I ended up having to go in, and the route at that point was go get your English certification, and then you can get your special ed certification. So which is what I did. So I went in, Paul Andrade, God bless his soul, he hired me, and he was a special ed director at the time, but he was also the assistant superintendent. So I started at Noble, and the benefits of getting into a school system is that typically they pay for a couple courses per year. Right. So that's something I always encourage people to do. And so I actually got my master's degree with the support of the school system. I finished my English certification fairly easily because I had enough credits, in terms, enough. Right, I was an English major, so that was pretty simple. Yeah, right. So then I had to get a transitional certification for special education, and I had to take a lot of classes. And by the time I was done with those classes just to get certified, I was like 3 classes shy of my master's. Wow. So I just finished it.
Yeah. So your master's is in
special education. And I liked it. Taking classes is great. It's great for networking. It's really good for just having conversations about the work that you're doing and it being real. It's a lot different than the classes you take because you have to take them.
So true. And I think when you're actually working, they're so much more relevant.
Yeah, you can actually just talk about real life issues that you're dealing with and maybe get some support, which is nice. Yeah, it's really helpful.
And I think it's also, just to touch back a bit about how you landed the job initially, that's such a classic way to land a job is through a connection. Yep. And it's not always necessarily the most qualified candidate. It's a lot more times who you know.
Yeah, it is who you know.
And you do have to obviously
Yeah, you brought something to the table.
Right, you have to perform, right.
Yeah.
And you have to prove yourself once you're there.
But getting in the door is often who do you know?
Yeah.
Who you know at first, for sure.
Yep.
Right.
In that
so
world.
It's so interesting to hear those stories because we hear it over and over again. Yeah.
It is definitely that.
Yeah, building your network is always a good tip too. When everybody's asking, how can I move from one job to another, work on that network.
It's true. It's true. And it's different. I mean, I've been in the Noble system for 30 years, which is unusual. It's not typical of the world today at all.
No, not at all.
But within that, I've had different roles, and that's really probably what's kept me from jumping out a window or something.
Having new jobs.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. At one point in my second or third year, I said, I think I'm going to go back to school and be a lawyer.
No kidding.
Yep. I did. But
Meg was in that track for a while.
Yeah. Yep. My brother's an attorney. So I was like, you know what? That looks interesting to me. I might try to do that. But there was just always something new coming in the school system that I was like, I really want to stick around and see that happen. I want to see that happen. And so that's what
kept you engaged.
That's what kept us engaged. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
For sure.
That's great. That means you love your job.
Yeah. No, it's true. I do. I really do love it.
Also talking about the students at Odyssey, you were mentioning that they were the ones that got help. Did you find that made a big difference, that they did get help? Did you feel like it was a success story?
I do. I think that so much of the struggle with students that are in a situation like that or really dealing with substance abuse issues, there's so much background that we don't know or find out about. And it's still cycling today.
Yeah.
And they've labeled sort of that trauma piece that we hear about a lot now. We're hearing about how trauma is impacting kids' lives. But it's the same things that were happening 30 years ago, in terms of people struggling with just a lot of substance abuse issues that impact our kids. And you don't know what comes first. Was it something traumatic that happened that led them to the substance abuse or the other way around? So it's sort of a
so you're unsure if the attention helped or not.
Oh, I think that it helped because what happened is that the students that were there were kids that were either court ordered or were placed through an IEP process. So they had to have acted out pretty significantly to be there. When I started my job at Noble, what I realized was the kids that were at Noble who were in our programming as a special ed teacher, so they had special programming, were just as needy, but weren't at a place where they
weren't at such a extensive level.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that makes such sense. And do you think like all your different roles from ed tech to special ed and so forth have helped make you a better assistant superintendent?
Oh, for sure.
Kind of learning it from the ground up, and even probably your days as working in a restaurant, your
absolutely.
family business.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm sure all of that brings something to the table.
Yep. At one point in one of our special ed classes we had to take, one of our professors asked us to write an essay or whatever about how you got where you were. And I completely blame my father for the fact that,
in a good way?
In a good way. He was a teacher.
Yeah.
So I saw that cycle of work. We were also had the vegetable stand.
Right.
So when I was 9 years old, I was down at the bottom of the driveway
selling vegetables
to, at the time, predominantly French-speaking community because Stanford was heavily French-speaking. And horrified. I was scared. Believe it or not, I was a very shy person.
Oh, my God.
I consider myself that circumstantial extrovert. Like, really, I'm an introvert at heart, but it's like, oh, boy, I guess you got to... So I blame my dad for that completely. But
that was probably such a good experience.
It was, but,
Do you want to just give your family restaurant a little plug?
Sure. So Shane's and Maine Ice Cream is my family. We used to be Shane's restaurant. After my mom passed away, we did close the restaurant down because it was just a little too much. And my brother has done some things with it over the years, but primarily it's the ice cream business. And yay, Jeff Shane, he's done a great job with it. So and I have 3 other brothers who count as well, but they're not in the biz. They're not in the family biz.
Well, it is excellent ice cream.
Thank you.
Anybody that's local has definitely had Shane's and Maine.
Thank you.
For sure, it's delicious.
Leaving ice cream, which I hate to do, can you tell us what a typical day is like as a special ed teacher?
So I was a case manager for anywhere between 30 and 40 students, depending on the time at the high school at that time. It's gotten much better in terms of the numbers aren't.
Yeah, that's
that
a
we've
lot.
hired more staff, so the ratios are better. I worked with primarily students with learning disabilities, and a good percentage of those were teenage boys for the most part. And so we did a lot of work just helping them basically transition through high school and get the credits that they needed. And it was really built on relationships. I was able to help students get through their classes, then they were able to get the credits they needed and graduate. And we worked on transition plans to after school into adulthood, that kind of thing.
So did they come to you or did you go into the classroom?
So originally we actually had separate classes set up. And so I taught my first couple of years, I taught daily living 1 and 2, which is, now I look back and go, oh my goodness. I taught math and U.S. history. Within the first year, I team taught with a longtime history teacher at Noble, Harley Johnson, which some of you guys will know, right?
Yeah, definitely know Harley.
It was a great combination. We had a great time together. And then within about a year and a half or two, we had a new principal who came into this school, and we shook it up quite a bit. And we developed, instead of these separate classes for special ed students, we actually started doing the integration into more heterogeneous grouping. And so I would support kids in classes, and we did it as sort of a case management style.
And that's pretty much the trend today,
it is,
right?
absolutely the trend today, yeah. So we developed a learning center.
What do they call it? Mainstreaming?
Mainstreaming, so we developed a learning center where kids could come in and get support, whether they were special ed or regular ed, and that was really helpful. But it took a while. It's an evolution, basically.
So you were part of that whole process.
Yeah, we were. And that's what kept me at Noble, is that we went from a place that was really, really traditional with like 6 or 7 tracks of students to a much more innovative way to work with kids.
You must be proud of that.
Very much so, yeah.
Because you got to help develop it. So
absolutely, and it was, we had a good buy-in. You know, the special ed department at the time was really, we knew that in order for it to be successful, we had to support it. So we were all in, and worked on teams. It was great.
The synergy was good.
Yeah, and that's it. And that's like a whole nother podcast, because it's been a trip. After 10 years, the director of special education role came up. So I applied, and actually we did a co-director piece with a gentleman, Mark Bell, and I did it for a couple of years prior to me going into the assistant superintendent role. So
how long were you in that role for?
So I did that for 2 years only, actually. And then things happened in terms of the office with Mr. Bourbon retiring. It just all fell into place, and I stepped into that role. I was pretty young for that. I was like 34 when I stepped into that role.
That was young for that.
Yeah, I was 32 when I stepped into the co-director position.
That's what you get for longevity when you stay at one place and you build up.
Now, did you have to further your education with administrative stuff? Or?
So I needed to, for each level, you end up with a different certification. So I had to take more classes to become certified as the director of special ed. It wasn't a lot, but it was supervision and evaluation. Yep. Organizational behavior, things like that for the administrative role. And then as the assistant superintendent, I opted to get the superintendent certification because it kind of covers everything. So I needed to put a portfolio together and present my portfolio, and then they were able to look and see what, through my experiences, they could check off as being done, and then what I needed else to do. I had to do an internship for a year, that kind of thing. So I think
you must feel like technically you have like 5 graduate degrees.
Well, it's interesting because there's a rumor out there that they're going to ask for the superintendent role to have a certificate of advanced study or potentially a doctoral.
Oh my goodness!
Which I think that won't pass. I think it's actually in the legislature right now. Because nobody's going to want to do that.
To accumulate all your certificates and education, I think you say, I have a doctorate.
Yeah, but it's right, technically, but so we'll see what that happens with that.
Stack it all up and just put an EDD.
So I've never really chased the letters. I just want to do my job.
In the skill set.
Yeah.
Well, and also the more time you're in school, the less time you're working with the kids.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's
you only have so many hours.
Right,
in
and
the day.
I had to raise a family too, in between all that.
Raise
with
a
my
family.
Husband,
Right. So it is pretty impressive. It's one of the largest school systems in the state of Maine, if I'm not
mistaken.
I think
we're like the 4th largest, something like that.
So it's quite a job.
Yeah.
Drawing from 3 towns, Yeah,
these communities are wonderful, though. I can't say enough. I've been asked to go elsewhere. I've had positions offered, and it's like I just can't leave. I just really love it.
You're integrated.
I love MSAD 60.
That's great. Yep. It's awesome to love your job.
Yeah.
What sort of education or training would you recommend to listeners that want to follow your path and become an assistant superintendent? What would you suggest to a young person? Like, what's the best way to achieve that?
The best thing you can do is get involved with your school. So if you are a teacher, get involved with the leadership teams that are there. Any opportunity that's offered to take on a different role in your building other than just in your classroom. There's nothing just about being in the classroom.
No, right.
But get involved with your school.
Right. If they're looking for someone to say, hey, we need someone to lead up.
Yes, there's all kinds of like extracurricular activities that you can get involved with so that you stay connected with kids. I used to coach track. I was class advisor for one of our years and stuff like that.
So all of those things help out?
They definitely help out because you become integrated in your school and you take a lot more ownership. And I think that's really important. People want to see your commitment.
Right.
They'll look to the folks that are committed to kids to start getting involved with more of the school leadership piece. So your principal's going to look at you and say, Bobby's done this, and look, she's done such a great job with those kids. Let's see if she wants to get involved with, another aspect of the curriculum. Or just at Noble alone, I know there's a leadership team. There's team leaders in each of their roles. Just anything that really just integrates you more into your school. Whether you think you want to do this forever or not, it just shows a positive commitment to kids.
Right.
That's a great tip.
And would it be unusual if you came in as superintendent or assistant superintendent, you never taught, or is it pretty much everybody that you go up through the ranks? I mean,
think I know a superintendent who hasn't had classroom experience. But there are some states that hire, particularly those states that use, for instance, Florida has what they think is a small amount of superintendents, but they oversee thousands of kids and large numbers of staff. I know there's constantly a battle about we have too much administration. I'm happy to talk to somebody about that at some point in our lives, because the reality of it is that when Governor LePage was comparing us to Florida and saying Florida only has so many superintendents, well, those folks are like overseeing assistant superintendents, or I don't know what they call them out there, but associate super. Exactly.
Yeah, they're all
so
in
it all
there
comes
somewhere.
down to the same thing. Exactly.
Just a different job
But
title.
some of those people that were hired as those large scale superintendents have more of a business background instead of a teaching background.
Like executive leadership.
Exactly.
Because they're managing
lots of people. Right. So I guess it's possible in some places. In the state of Maine, I would say you need to have classroom experience at some level.
So sounds like you should really tune into what's going on in your own area or your own state and make a decision that way.
Look at that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of folks think you have to be a principal at some point to be in a superintendent position. I wasn't a principal. I was a director of special education, so it's a bigger...
So do you think that role of transitioning and being the director and that whole leadership position of bringing it from a traditional situation to a more must have been a huge factor in you?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
And also your coaching track and other things.
Yeah.
So and teaching in the classroom.
Yeah.
So in Maine, that would be a good strategy, and probably in New England in general.
Yeah, I would say so.
Not sure about the bigger states.
I think it just depends on where you go.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I like that. I like going up through the
Going through the ranks.
teacher.
Yeah,
I do, because I feel like by the time you get to that position, you have a lot of empathy and understanding.
Absolutely.
You have to remember where you came from.
Where you
Yeah.
came from. Yeah. And there's so many times I've heard comments from teachers where administration has no idea what's going on in the classroom. They're making decisions from afar, but they've never been in the classroom. And so I think if you have that sense and that understanding, that you can make such better decisions.
Like I always tip my waitress as well, because I was a waitress.
Right. Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
Right. Same thing. Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
So could you tell us what a typical day is like for you? You mentioned it wasn't typical.
probably
which is
so
give us a sample day.
But if you could give us a sample day, just so people have an idea of what an assistant superintendent actually does.
And it's fairly funny because people don't really have any idea what anybody in our office does.
Yeah.
I'd love to have someone follow me around for a day because it's pretty fun. Or not. It just depends on the moment.
Well, maybe we could turn this into a
reality show.
Yeah,
reality show.
video you.
We'll follow you around for a day. I like that.
Or 2 or 3.
Yeah, we do. It's
to get the really good edits, and we'd have to go a good week.
It's true. That'd be funny. It's interesting. Every day is just a little different. My schedule is made basically of just meeting upon meeting upon meeting. So I go from meetings to meetings. Today I walked in, and I was away. So I came in and I stopped at Mary Herd Academy first and chatted with them about a student who needed some support with their academics for graduation. One of my roles as the assistant superintendent is that I am the administrator for the Mary Herd Academy, which is it's a special purpose program for kids with behavioral or emotional stuff, going on. So it's sort of like a out of district but in district program that we developed a few years ago. So I stopped in there, I met with a couple of kids, met with some staff, worked on that piece of it. So that was 8 in the morning, and then I got to the office and I just had to pour through all the emails to figure out what I had left to do today. But we met with some folks that were trying to think we've got a construction project coming up and that we're going to go to bid on. So we needed to talk about the policies and procedures of procuring bids and doing all that kind of piece.
Can you talk about that at all, or is
it can a little bit. In the long term, we are looking at some additions to the North Berwick Elementary School, to the Huzzy School, and then build an additional building in Lebanon because the old Lebanon Elementary School is in need of replacement.
So
It's not something that you can really repair.
Going.
So yeah,
Potential
projects that we're going to be looking at for the town for the bond issues and things like that in the future.
Yeah, that's not a hat I would have thought of for assistant superintendent.
Right. So I partake in all of that information because it's the business manager and I and the superintendent who are just trying to keep all those things in the air, juggle all that stuff. And it's good for all of us to have the same information at the same time. Sure. So we meet together a lot for those kind of things. So we met and talked about, what to put this out to bid, what does that mean, and how do you make sure that you have the bid process fair for everybody, that kind of thing. Met with another individual who's working on a grant for us. That's a safety grant that we're trying to get, and we just had to go through the process and figure out what are we doing, who needs to do what, and how can I help. And
have you had to do any grant writing yourself?
Yeah, And then part of that is there's a glitch in the technology because it's a U.S. government grant that's using an old database or an old format that doesn't have a secure site. So it's like something that should be simple.
You had to negotiate that.
No, I didn't do it. I made sure that the technology guy did it.
Right,
but it's
right.
you have to pull in all these people that you just didn't expect you have to pull in. And
right.
Yeah. So the gentleman who's writing the grant, he and I have a date tomorrow night at like 7:30 to just go over everything because it's due Friday. So we have to get it all done.
Wow.
So those things happen.
Right. So your day's long. It can
be. Yeah, it can be super long. Yeah. I try to get into the office by 8:00 every day because I'm there at least until 4:30 or 5. But
then you're doing things like podcasts and
or we have board meetings and things like that. It's but it's it is what it is. It's part of the job, and that's okay. And I I enjoy it.
We can tell it's well past 4:30. Yeah, you're still working.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Well, it's all good.
Yeah.
So just things like that. That's just today, and I actually then 2 weeks ago I met with 3 or 4 different students who were struggling behaviorally, and so one of my conversations with them is about how rare it is to meet with the assistant superintendent when you're a 12-year-old boy, and
that's true.
Yeah, that's rare. It's like helping kids jump through those hoops and try to get them to a place where they understand that they need to
challenging.
Straighten up and fly right a little bit. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
I'm sure you have to deal with parents a lot as well, and so that can go well or not so well sometimes, I'm sure.
Yeah. I have been fortunate in that most of the time I can work with families and get through tough situations.
Like you have a personality that you could...
I will tell you that my role as the co-director of special ed helped me immensely in working with parents because that's what I did all the time was work with families.
So it's good preparation.
It helped a ton because in the old days I would have been a little bit nervous about talking with families about some really delicate situations, and you don't have choices when you're working in those really close relationships.
So it brought you to a comfort level with all of that.
It did. Yeah. As I've gotten older and a little less, I don't know.
You don't want to use
concerned.
Yeah, I was going to say sensitive, but I know what you mean. You trust your instincts. You have to do what you right.
Yeah.
You have to do this job, and you try to be delicate, but you still have to confront whatever situation you're dealing with. Yeah.
And one of my roles as the assistant superintendent is as the homeless liaison for the district. So those are conversations that are really hard for families to have. So I'm super sensitive about reaching out to them and talking with them about what's happening and what we can do to support them.
Well, that's a perfect segue because we're meeting today at the Ryan House, which is a project you took on, and that must have been what inspired you to do so.
It absolutely did. Yeah.
So if you don't mind telling the listeners a little bit about
Sure. So the Ryan home, and we have to, and I'm sorry. It's okay. No, I'll tell you why, and you'll remember it, is that there is a Ryan House in a couple of different states that are different types. So there's a Ryan House for Youth in Washington State, and they've been super helpful with us. They've given us a lot of support. But her first word of advice to me was change your name.
Right.
And I said, why is that? And she said, because there's a Ryan House, which is a medical sort of affiliation in Arizona, and they sued us for the name. Because they copyrighted the Ryan House.
They sued the Washington group?
Yep.
Yeah. So they saved you the
she's
lawsuit.
Change your name.
Change
so
your
we
name,
just went from the Ryan House to the Ryan Home, and actually then people liked it better. Right, because home means, that's what we're looking for. Right.
House is just a house.
It took me a long time to change that too, because it was always the Ryan House in my head too. So the Ryan Home.
Right.
That's okay. But it all stemmed from an afternoon where I had a couple kids come into my office and with no place to go that night. I didn't know what I could do for them.
You had no answer.
So I had no answer.
And that's got to be heartbreaking and frustrating.
It's hard. It's really hard. So you do what you can, and we were like, we could do more. We can figure this out. And we separated from the school though, because originally we really did talk about it as a school system, but then we backed away from that and said, let's just do private, nonprofit and go from there.
So it's been a real community effort led by you, but you have...
Led by a lot of people. It's really, I have a great group of people. Including the Ryan family, who has been super supportive. I mean, we're here because of you guys, you know.
It's all you guys.
Yeah,
I feel like we did
team.
so little compared to all the effort you all have put in.
Yeah,
but we're glad to have helped in any way we could, and we're thrilled to have this.
We're really it's all coming together. It's been so when was that? When did we meet with you guys? That was in 2017. That was in October, November. We met with you, the family at first, and kind of kicked it off in January 2018. And here we are, basically 18 months later, and we have the home, and we're well on our way to getting the house parents in place for hopefully the fall.
I mean, that's just fantastic.
Yeah.
You guys have worked so hard.
Tell us a little bit about your vision, just for the listeners that don't know. And how people can help if they'd like to.
So the vision changes every day, to be honest with you.
I'm sure.
It's really grown. Originally, we were like, let's just get a house and bring kids in and love them up and it'll all be great.
Right.
But
sounds easy.
It sounds super easy. And then the reality of it is there's a lot to go with that.
So you were inspired by your heart, but then the reality of running something like this set in, and
there's a lot of rules and regulations.
Yeah, there's a lot of, it's interestingly, we're sort of flying in this different zone. Well, I had the folks from like licensing come down from the state, and they really didn't know where to put us, which was really, and they were like, I'm not sure what category you fall into. Right, we're not exactly
this, or you're not exactly that.
So they just sort of said, carry on, which was what we kind of did. The Ryan Home Project has 3 layers. It's got the first layer is the house itself, and our goal is to staff the house and be able to have the availability for beds for kids in emergency situations or even some longer term if need be. The second leg of it is the host families, which are families in our community who are willing to take students in for a period of time, sometimes short periods, sometimes longer.
So if anybody is interested or willing to do that, should they contact you?
Yes. So
and we'll put all that information in the show notes.
Sure. Thank you. And so the easiest thing is probably via email, which is just the Ryan Home Project at gmail.com. So
the Ryan Home Project at
gmail.com.
Yeah, that's
and it will be in the show notes.
Yeah, it
perfect.
will be.
And then our last piece of it is that we want to develop a model that can be replicated in any town, because the goal of this is to keep kids in their communities,
right? And
not
in school.
having to travel in school. And that's part of our deal, is that you have to be in school in order to access the services.
So if another town was interested in something like this, should they contact you to?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been up to Topsom and met with a group up there who's trying to do similar things with the host home piece, and we had a great conversation. I'm happy to help anybody with anything with it, because this is a huge issue.
It is.
That's just sort of like under the surface. It's not rocket science. It could be done.
I've heard about kids living in groups in the woods.
Oh.
Yeah. Have you had a lot of role models throughout the country to follow, or is this?
There are not a ton. There are some. So, for instance, the Ryan House for Youth does almost exactly what we're doing, except they have more of a complex for their building, and then they have their host homes, and they're actually considering just running their host homes because the complex is so hard to maintain.
Yeah.
So, I'm trying for us not to get crazy big, but just to deal with what's in front of us.
Do you have any vision for any programs or like assistance with homework or things of that nature?
So the whole piece of this is to develop a setting where kids can get supports in whatever areas they need. So it's like the homework situation or counseling, at least referrals to counseling, so we can get people the support they need. Transitional services, helping kids get ready to leave high school and go into college or into the military or into the workforce, whatever it needs to be. So teaching kids skills that they don't have.
Absolutely.
I mean, a lot of kids don't have mechanical skills. They don't have cooking skills. They don't really know how to do the financing part of their world. So all of those are things that we're looking to help students with. And once we have sort of the flow going, our goal is to develop a series of folks that are interested in supporting and helping that. Like, so somebody wants to give 2 hours a week just working on financial stuff. Or
set up a volunteer network. So what do you most need? How can people best help?
So we're in really good shape in terms of the furnishings of the house right now. It's in great shape. However, we are going to have a large yard sale on July 13th. So if people want to donate decent goods that they're willing for us to sell, then that's great. But we don't have a lot of storage before that. So
you bring it that day.
Yeah, or the day before. Yeah. And
it's going to be at the high school? Or?
It's going to be right here.
Oh, right here? That's
excellent. We're going to do it right here. We're going to have a touch of truck, hopefully, in the...
There's a lot of traffic on this road, so it does well.
So we're going to
do that. For the listeners that are not local.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So honestly, it's funding. Funding is the biggest issue.
So it's money.
I'd love to say...
Write checks.
Yeah.
Well, you do have a GoFundMe page.
We do have a GoFundMe page in the Ryan Home Project.
And we'll put that in the show notes.
Okay.
Anybody that wants to.
And it's hard that we need to always be thinking about money, but
it's an expensive ordeal.
Yeah. The working budget for this is about $90,000 a year. So
you have to raise that every year.
We do.
Yeah.
That's what we have to do. So, but we've done well. Right. We're going to be okay.
You are.
We'll just keep working.
Yeah.
Well, you have the best energy and you're so positive that...
Well, this house has the energy, honestly. It's a really interesting...
It is a good home.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you want to just take the opportunity to publicly thank anybody you want to.
Oh, I don't...
There's so many people.
Well, I would just say that the communities of North Berwick and Lebanon have been really fabulous, and again, the Ryans have been wonderful, and the Bourbon family has been wonderful for us.
They absolutely have.
Yeah, but I can't,
The list is long.
The list is long. That there's businesses that have been incredibly supportive. Spencer Matthews has been providing our insurance. Peak Agnew and Son did a huge amount of oil for us for the winter, just things like that. Yeah, the list goes on and on.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. I'm humbled every day by what I get.
It takes a village, as I say.
And you just had a special day here.
We did. Oh, yeah. Keller Williams did their Red Day for us and spruced up the place unbelievably.
It looks amazing.
Yeah, it looks beautiful.
And the new path to the school.
Yeah, yep.
It's beautiful.
To our parking lot.
Yeah, but, right, exactly. You need that overflow parking.
Exactly. That's what we did.
Would you ever consider speaking tour in different states if people approached you to do that?
Yeah. The only thing I would ask for is somebody get me there.
Right.
Fly me there,
I'm there. Get me there,
or
pay for my hotel.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be happy to do that.
I can see communities saying, well, if we could get Sue to speak to our community.
Yeah. I remember the day that I stood in front of the entire faculty of MSAD 60 as the director of special education, and I had to say something. And I remember how red I got and how horrified I was.
Yeah.
I'm past that. So I can speak, especially on something like this, because I'm so passionate about it. It's a lot easier. Yeah.
And you have another little side business going on.
Yes, she does.
And it's Lucky Clover's Stables, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So can you tell us just a bit about that?
Sure. So I've always loved horses, and I grew up on a farm, and I've always had a horse in my life.
We've always wanted a horse when we were kids.
You had a great spot for a horse, too.
We did.
My dad would say, well, let's see if you can ride one, and he'd squeeze your knee and tickle it. And, of course, inevitably, you're going to laugh. Well, sorry, you fell off the horse.
You can't handle it.
That's funny.
So no horses for us. But anyway.
So, well,
as we all wanted.
Yeah, I was fortunate that my father actually loved horses as well. And so we always had a horse around. I always had a pony or something. But we also had, my family's farm was a vegetable farm. So we had acres of tomatoes and peas and corn, and I picked a lot of vegetables in my day. And we had a small area for the horses, and we also had some cows. So anyways, I always loved horses. I didn't ever do anything. I was not a shower or any of that stuff. I was like the backyard cowgirl, jump on and ride out into the woods with friends.
Did you ride Western or just bareback?
I did both, Western and bareback, And shortly after my mom died, my dad was, had been working the fields for years, but the barn itself needed some work. And he just said, do you want to do something with this? And I said, I think I do. So, we talked it over as a family and we worked on the barn. It needed a lot of work. My only sadness in life is I can't find the pictures of the farm the way it was before. They're in some place in a computer somewhere. You know how that goes in the old
Anybody
computers?
Has one, send it our way.
Yeah. So I have, in my head I have it, but anyways, so we built the barn and built our business from there, really intending to have like 8 or 10 horses. And that was it.
Can you tell us what you do?
Yeah, we have 45 horses.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
I had no idea.
we have 130 acres of land, so there's just lots of pasture and stuff, and
So you're boarding them, but you don't.
So, right, they do not. We
you
don't.
don't
I own
them.
more than I need to.
How many
I can tell
do you
that.
personally own?
I don't even want to say.
You
it
don't
out
even want
loud.
to say it's embarrassing.
No.
Right,
It is embarrassing. Yep.
13, 14.
All right, Meg,
that,
don't
that,
push it.
That's
That would
that would
be
be
nice.
perfect, but no, a little higher.
Well, what
19.
probably happens is you end up rescuing.
We did, at the very beginning we rescued a bunch. I have several
and
horses that have been with
so-
me since my mom actually died in 2002. So it was 2005 that we opened the farm, and so it's been
14 years, yeah.
this year.
So 45 horses there.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
do you
And
do, so that's
So
boarding.
we do boarding and we do lessons and we put on shows. So we put on 6 shows a year. My older daughter Brooke has come home and actually now runs the farm for me.
Right.
Thank God.
Yeah.
And she is.
I'm so relieved because I'm sitting here picturing Sue's running the Ryan.
No, I get up
home.
early in the morning. I do get up early and go out, and I usually take care of the haying, and because that's just I get to see eyes on the horses in the morning, and then I head off to work and leave the rest of it to
It probably
them.
sets your mood
It
right
does,
for the
actually.
day.
It's a great way to wake up and look out the window and see all your animals and stuff. It's probably more than we should have done. We've gotten a little bigger than we anticipated, and we always go back and forth about should we try to make it smaller again, and we'll see what happens.
Right.
But we'll always be there for sure, and we're always looking for. I love to get adults back into riding.
Right.
It's one of my favorite things to do is to teach adults. That is my primary one that I
Meg,
get
maybe you and I should go out there.
You
know,
bet. You bet.
Do a little riding.
It's super fun, and the horses are incredibly therapeutic. So some of the work that I actually would love to move forward with is some work with therapy horses and stuff. So, but it's great therapy for adults. It's
So,
it's a
like,
lot of
when
fun.
you say therapy, like, what kind of therapy?
Well, honestly, it's just more emotional
Just
stuff where people
emotional,
really
just where they-
just that
puts them in a
whole
happier place,
exactly,
yeah.
and just being able to connect with animals. Yep,
Yeah.
they're very calming, and you really have to be self-aware when you're around them. So that helps you sort of
Stay in
look
the
at yourself a
moment,
little bit.
or-
Exactly,
yeah.
stay in the moment. Yeah, so it's fun that way. And so, anyways, we love the little ones too. So we got summer camps. We'd like to
Okay.
fill them up. Come on
Okay.
down.
Yeah. So
Summer camps.
we'll put
Put that
the
info in there.
links in
Thank
the
you.
show notes, and
You guys are funny.
if
Yeah.
So
Well, you have so
PR
many
to the
things
world.
going.
so
We
you
do have a lot going.
You have
We do.
summer camps and lessons and boarding.
Yep, and shows, horse
and
shows.
shows.
Yep.
Okay,
So
good
I
to
wish
know.
I had a good website, but it's on our Facebook page, our Lucky Clover Facebook page.
That's okay, as long as you have an email and a
Yeah,
phone number.
you
They
betcha.
can, and an address. That sounds amazing. Does Brooke ever get a day off?
She does. I try to give her
Yeah.
Tuesdays off. So
Okay.
today was her day off. I wonder how that worked out.
But do you have help if she needs to?
We're a real family-oriented barn. I have a crew of folks that we do a little trading. So our stalls are covered by one group of ladies that just do the stalls to trade off a board.
Oh,
Right.
that's perfect.
I can't do it a lot because financially you need to
Right.
be able to,
Right.
but we have it worked out pretty well. And so occasionally I
You
have
have
a
enough
slots
to
open up. But
cover your help.
we do. We absolutely do. And that's the problem with horses. They are expensive. They are expensive. So
Yes.
I always tell parents when they get in the door, I'm like, look, I'm not going to lie to you. If they fall into it and they love it, hang on. Because it
Yeah.
can get,
Right.
it
The
can get
vet
big.
bills.
Yeah, but there's
all those
always
things.
ways to help things out. And I would always encourage people to lease a horse instead of buy a horse.
Oh, you can actually do that.
You betcha. I got a few for lease right now. You guys need to come over.
I want to come visit.
You should, for sure. I'd love it.
All right. Well, Susan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. And oh my gosh, you shared so much amazing information about special ed teaching, being an assistant superintendent, running a restaurant.
Yeah, the needs of displaced children in our communities. Yeah, you have a lot going on.
We do.
I'm exhausted.
It's all good. It's all
But
good.
you're the woman for the job. We're really impressed.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you
Appreciate
for being
it.
on the podcast
It
today.
was a pleasure.
I have no idea how Sue keeps track of everything she has going on. She's incredible.
Yeah, no, seriously. She's like Wonder Woman.
I really enjoyed learning about her career path from working at the Odyssey House helping teens to becoming an assistant superintendent. I think anyone working in the school system or with kids and teens in any setting will enjoy hearing Sue's story.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about going over to Cloverleaf Stables and going riding. I already eat plenty of Shane's ice cream.
That's
Which
for
is
sure.
true.
If you are still with us, thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We truly appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in. You can also help us a ton by hitting that subscribe button on iTunes or wherever you are getting your podcasts.
Yes, please subscribe and have a great week, everyone.
Thanks for listening. And as a final note, anyone interested in learning more about our business, academic and career advising services, we invite you to visit our website, and we will include that link in the show notes. We assist people with changing careers, possibly finding that first job out of college, the college admissions process, selecting an academic major, deciding on a career, or things of that nature. You can check it all out on our website, Academic and Career Advising Services. We are located in Kennebunk, Maine. However, for your convenience, we also offer video conferencing services. You're never too old to change your career or to go back to college, and you're never too young to begin thinking about your future. We enjoy serving people of all ages.
If you enjoyed listening to today's podcast and would like to help us out, could you please leave a rating or review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts?
This really helps others to find our podcast.
We would greatly appreciate it. Also, to get all the latest on upcoming episodes, please follow us on social media. All of those links will be included in the show notes. Thank you and have a great day.
Thanks so much for listening.